Ladies and gentlemen, there is a conversation that needs to happen right now, and it needs to happen with the kind of clarity and directness that this situation genuinely deserves, because what emerged from Cleveland today goes well beyond the highlight clips and the celebratory footage of Shedeur Sanders operating with the first team unit during voluntary minicamp. What emerged today is a secondary storyline that in many ways carries equal or greater significance than anything that happened between the hashmarks during that practice session. And it is a storyline that certain voices in the Cleveland media landscape are already working overtime to contextualize, minimize, and quietly explain away before it has the chance to fully register with the fan base that deserves to understand exactly what it means. Deshaun Watson refused to speak to the media following Cleveland Browns' voluntary minicamp practice. Stop right there. Do not let that sentence slide past you without giving it the full weight it deserves. Because in the world of professional football, in the specific context of a quarterback who is supposedly engaged in an active competition for the starting position of a National Football League franchise, that sentence is not a minor administrative detail. It is not a scheduling quirk. It is not a misunderstanding between a player and his media relations department. It is a deliberate decision made by a grown professional man who knew exactly what he was doing, understood exactly what it communicated, and made the choice anyway. And the fact that Cleveland Browns reporters, the people who are in that building every single day, who cover this team as their primary professional responsibility, began reporting it across multiple platforms and multiple podcast conversations tells you everything you need to know about how those people, the ones with the closest view of what is actually happening inside that organization, interpreted what Watson did. Now let us set the stage completely, because the full context of this refusal is what transforms it from an interesting footnote into a genuinely revealing window into the actual state of this quarterback situation and into the actual state of Deshaun Watson's relationship with Cleveland, with this team, and with the competitive process that is supposedly determining the future direction of this franchise. The day before Watson declined his media availability, Shedeur Sanders had just completed a minicamp practice in which he received all of the first team reps during 11-on-11 drills. Not some of the reps, not a carefully balanced portion of the reps designed to maintain the appearance of an open competition. All of them. Sanders broke the huddle first. Sanders threw the ball first with the starting unit. Sanders was the first quarterback to step into the most revealing and most consequential portion of the practice session.
It does feel like that relationship, between the media and Deshaun, and I don't know, like the city and Deshaun's been broken a little bit. And you know what I just said about there being a new start for everybody, I think there's an opportunity to rebuild that now, I mean, God knows, no one's expecting a ton this year, so what this looks like in September and October, November, I don't think anybody's got outsized expectations. And just like I said about Shedeur, I think this time of year there's a good chance to kind of hit the reset button and have a chance to give everybody a new outlook on where things are. And I would hope that Deshaun would take advantage of that opportunity, because I think that opportunity is in front of him now. Again, nobody's expecting a lot this year. He's in the last year of his contract, and maybe this is where he can turn his career around. And I know talking to people in the media, people like me, may not be the most relevant thing in the world, but I do think he can make his life easier if he starts to rebuild some of those relationships as well.
And he operated there with the kind of comfort and precision that generated clip after clip of positive footage circulating across every platform covering this team. He was wearing the number 2 jersey in a Browns uniform for the first time. He had a helmet camera mounted on his helmet as part of Todd Monken's sophisticated evaluation process. He was delivering accurate, well-timed throws to receivers including Isaiah Bond, and the overall impression he left on the coaching staff, the reporters, and the cameras was unambiguously positive. And then the next day, Deshaun Watson was asked to speak to the media and said no. Think about the sequence of those two events placed directly next to each other, because the proximity is not coincidental and the contrast is not subtle. One quarterback spent his time on that practice field doing everything a competitor is supposed to do, taking every available opportunity, performing at a level that generated genuine enthusiasm from observers, and building the kind of positive narrative that a young quarterback competing for a starting job needs to establish with the organization, the fan base, and the broader football world. The other quarterback, the veteran with the enormous contract and the complicated recent history, responded to that situation by declining to fulfill one of the most basic professional obligations that comes with his position. That contrast tells a story. And the story it tells is not flattering for Deshaun Watson. Let us be completely honest about what media availability means for a starting NFL quarterback, because there are people attempting to frame Watson's refusal as something understandable, something defensible, something that reasonable people can look at and say does not really mean anything significant about his commitment level or his desire to be part of what Cleveland is building. Those people are wrong, and here is exactly why they are wrong. If Deshaun Watson were to win the starting quarterback competition with the Cleveland Browns, which at this point feels increasingly like a hypothetical being maintained for contractual and organizational optics reasons rather than a genuine competitive possibility, but if he were somehow to emerge as the starter heading into the 2026 season, he would stand in front of microphones and cameras after every single practice session. After every single game. After every single significant development surrounding this football team throughout the entire season. That is not optional. That is not something a starting quarterback can decline when the mood does not feel right or when the questions feel uncomfortable or when the circumstances of the day are not to his liking. That is a mandatory, ongoing, inescapable responsibility of the most visible leadership position in professional sports. So when Watson declines to speak to the media during a voluntary mini-camp practice, he is not exercising a harmless contractual right during a low-stakes off-season moment. He is demonstrating, in a way that is completely observable and completely documentable, that he either cannot or will not fulfill one of the foundational ongoing requirements of the job he is supposedly fighting to win. And that demonstration, made publicly and reported widely by the people covering this team every day, removes any remaining ambiguity about where Watson actually stands in relation to this entire situation. There are two honest explanations for what happened, and both of them lead to the same ultimate conclusion. The first explanation is that Watson is genuinely frustrated and genuinely upset about the way the quarterback competition has been structured, specifically about the fact that Shedeur Sanders received all the first-team reps during the opening practice of minicamp while Watson was relegated to a secondary role in the session. If that frustration is real, if Watson is sitting with genuine anger about being out-prioritized in a competition he believes he deserves to win, then his response to that frustration reveals something deeply important about his competitive character and his professional maturity. Because the appropriate response to being outworked or out-prioritized in a competition is not to shut down. It is not to withdraw from professional obligations. It is not to make yourself less visible and less cooperative in the moments when the people evaluating you are watching most closely. The appropriate response is to work harder, prepare more thoroughly, show up the next day with renewed focus and elevated performance, and demonstrate through action rather than absence that you deserve more consideration than you received. Watson's response was the opposite of that. His response was silence. His response was a closed door and a declined media session and reports circulating from Cleveland reporters about his general distaste for engaging with the media environment in that city. That is not the response of a competitor who believes in himself and in his ability to win this job. That is the response of a player who has already made peace with an outcome he sees as inevitable and is simply managing his exit from a situation he no longer wants to be part of. The second explanation is simpler and in many ways even more telling. Watson does not want to be in Cleveland. Full stop. Not as a conclusion that requires extensive supporting analysis, but as a straightforward reading of everything his behavior has communicated throughout this process. The refusal to engage with the media. The reports of his distaste for the Cleveland media environment. The overall posture of a player whose body language and professional conduct consistently suggests someone who is present in name and in contract but absent in every other meaningful sense. All of it points toward a man who has mentally and emotionally moved on from this situation regardless of what the official competitive framework says about his status. And if that is true, if Watson has genuinely disconnected from this team and this opportunity in this city, then the Cleveland Browns organization needs to acknowledge that reality and act on it decisively rather than allowing it to linger as a distraction that disrupts the development environment being built around Shedeur Sanders. Because a disengaged veteran quarterback who refuses media availability and generates reports about his frustration with the Cleveland media does not make the locker room better. He does not make the practice environment more competitive in a productive way. He does not contribute to the culture of commitment and collective investment that a young quarterback needs around him as he develops into the franchise cornerstone this organization is betting on. He is a problem that is waiting to become a bigger problem if it is not addressed with clarity and purpose. Todd Monken spoke to the media yesterday following the practice session, which is itself a meaningful contrast to Watson's silence, because Monken's willingness to stand in front of
who was first reps. Shedeur to start. There were some other reps. The way it was going to turn out, Shedeur was going to get more reps. Some of it in pass Kelly, some of it in team. A couple of the team periods were slowed down ACT, more run than they were throw. So it was set up in a way for us to get a look at all of them. The plan was to have Shedeur have a few more reps, but to let Deshaun and Shedeur both have reps with the ones. It'll change each day. Each day we're going to change that to get a look at our guys. We have 3 days to get a great look at those guys, and it's awesome to be able to get these extra 3 days. We were just
reporters and answer questions about what happened and what it means reflects the transparent leadership approach that has characterized his early tenure with this team. In his comments, Monken addressed the quarterback rotation and confirmed that the situation would be evolving on a day-to-day basis as the evaluation process continues. He also made clear that Shedeur Sanders would be getting more reps moving forward. More reps. That is the head coach of the Cleveland Browns publicly confirming that the young quarterback who received all the first-team reps during the opening minicamp practice will continue to receive significant opportunities as the offseason program progresses. Read that against the backdrop of Watson refusing to speak to the media on the same day. The coach is confirming that the young quarterback will get more reps, the veteran is refusing to answer questions. The direction of this competition has never been more clearly visible than it is right now, and no amount of day-to-day rotation language or carefully managed official statements about open competition is going to change what is actually happening on that practice field and in that media room. Dillon Gabriel did speak to reporters following the session, and while his comments were not the primary focus of the day's coverage, his willingness to fulfill that professional obligation matters as a contextual reference point. Gabriel is a quarterback at a completely different stage of development than Watson, with far less organizational status and far less contract leverage and far less history with this franchise. And yet Gabriel stood in front of the cameras and answered questions while Watson did not. That is not a trivial contrast. That is a veteran quarterback being professionally outperformed in the media room by a developmental player, and it adds another layer to the portrait of a man who is not showing up for this competition in the ways that a genuine competitor shows up. The broader pattern of absences and disengagement surrounding this team also cannot be separated from the Watson storyline, because they are all threads in the same organizational fabric. Myles Garrett not attending voluntary minicamp. Jerry Jeudy not attending voluntary minicamp. Denzel Ward absent. Grant Delpit absent. And now Watson declining to speak to the media following a practice session in which he was visibly out-prioritized by the young quarterback competing against him. All of these individual decisions and individual behaviors accumulate into a collective picture of an organization where the alignment between leadership intention and roster-wide commitment is not yet where it needs to be. And here is why that matters so specifically and so urgently in relation to Shedeur Sanders and his development trajectory. A young quarterback growing into a starting role in the NFL absorbs everything around him. He absorbs the energy of his teammates, the commitment level of the veterans he is working alongside, the professional standards being modeled by the most experienced players in the building. When those veterans are demonstrating genuine investment in the collective mission, when they are showing up and engaging and competing at the highest possible level, that environment accelerates development. It raises the standard. It teaches the young quarterback through lived daily experience what professional excellence actually looks like. When veterans are absent or disengaged or refusing to fulfill basic professional obligations, the opposite happens. The environment becomes less demanding, less instructive, less capable of producing the kind of growth that a developmental quarterback needs to make the leap from promising young talent to genuine NFL starter. And that cost, while invisible in the short term, accumulates over time in ways that show up in the regular season when the preparation was not sufficient because the environment during the offseason was not demanding enough. Shedeur Sanders cannot control what Watson does or does not do with his professional obligations. He cannot control whether veterans show up to voluntary activities or whether the organizational culture around him reflects the kind of collective commitment that championship teams are built on. What he can control is his own behavior, his own preparation, his own willingness to show up and perform and accept every responsibility that comes with the position he is competing for. And on that front, the contrast with Watson could not be more complete or more revealing. Sanders was first in 11 on 11 drills. Sanders broke the huddle first. Sanders wore the helmet camera and gave his coaching staff everything they asked for. Sanders stood prepared and engaged and ready to compete while Watson was declining to answer questions from reporters in the same building on the same day. One of those quarterbacks is competing for a starting job with the full force of his professional commitment and his competitive energy. The other one is managing his exit from a situation he appears to have already emotionally left. And the Cleveland Browns organization, if it is serious about building something genuine and sustainable around the young quarterback who is showing up every single day and doing everything right, needs to acknowledge what Watson's behavior is communicating and make.
Maybe it's just because my mind did not allow myself to ever think we were going to see this again.
Mm-hmm.
It was crazy to me seeing Deshaun Watson running around and seem to be testing, the surgically repaired legs, ankles, Achilles, everything, lower body, extremities. Like to see him just running around and looking like Deshaun Watson. I know it's practice. Yeah, that's what it is for 32 NFL teams. Not even really a practice, whatever you want to call it. Although, were they going live? Was there some live elements to yesterday's 7-on-7, 11-on-11?
I don't think they're allowed to go live.
But it was just something for whatever reason that
I'm sure a couple guys ran into each other.
That I just assumed would never happen again. I never thought I'd see Deshaun Watson in a Browns uniform cutting, spinning, doing pirouettes, throwing
the organizational decisions that the situation clearly demands. The city of Cleveland deserves a quarterback who wants to be there. A quarterback who shows up. A quarterback who takes first-team reps and throws darts to his receivers and wears the helmet camera and stands in front of microphones and answers every question that reporters put to him because he understands that all of it, every single part of it, is part of the job. Part of the responsibility. Part of what it means to be the face of a franchise and the leader of a locker room and the player that an entire city is counting on to deliver something worth celebrating. Shedeur Sanders is being that quarterback right now. Every day. Every practice. Every available opportunity to demonstrate who he is and what he is capable of becoming. Deshaun Watson refused to talk to the media. The Cleveland Browns have a decision to make. And based on everything that has happened during this minicamp, based on every clip and every report and every observable data point available to anyone paying honest attention, the right decision has never been more obvious. Let Shedeur Sanders be the quarterback of the Cleveland Browns. He has already earned it. Now it is time for the organization to say so clearly and without qualification. Because the alternative, continuing to maintain the fiction of an open competition while one competitor performs and the other declines basic professional obligations, serves nobody. Not the team. Not the fan base. And certainly not the young quarterback who is doing everything right while waiting for the organization around him to catch up to what the practice field has already decided. The field told the truth. The media room confirmed it. And now it is time for Cleveland to act accordingly.